Welcome to the video, the Boricua record part 5. Links to the other parts in the description down below. Upon looking into the distance past Kamchatka's camp, a land of more ice and seemingly non-traversable glaciers, there had to be a reason for the migrating megafauna, and I was going to find out the hard way. I was ready to face this new threat head on. That being said, it took me a while to get Yi back on his feet. His emotions could pose a threat to the entire operation, but we could not blame poor Yi. We were at the brink too. Seeing our comrade Yi break down like that broke our hearts. My men and my whole nation witnessed Yi beating down Ken in total silence. Before our mission to retrieve Yuan, I decide I'm going to kill Ken. My men have Ken, Gog, Og, and Kirk tied up, and are ready to slice their throats at the snap of my fingers. Yi and I go to the kidnapping scene east to the edge of Kamchatka's camp to investigate further and talk about the futures of my peoples who were still harbored in Nanai's camp. The temperatures were dropping even more for some reason. It didn't seem natural. But I still couldn't understand the cause for this world of ice. When we reached the scene of the crime, Yi shows me why he beat down Ken. He then unveils an arrowhead that corresponded with the red hair I found. The arrow is what pinned his hair onto a pine tree before the fishing water holes, and it had Ken's scent all over it. I analyze in just a few seconds, and I tell him, Ken managed to reach this point of my nation's lands, but he did not lay a foot around the scene of the crime. It all points to Ken being the reason this newly found foe was deterred. Whatever it was, Ken had shot it with a powerful arrow blow from maybe 45 leagues away. My men interrogated a demoralized Ken. Apparently, Ken's nation was absorbed by Toro, whose power and influence was massive. He did this secretly, but incredibly fast. Toro exiled Ken from the nation of Ken, from parts of Altai to Balkai, along with a small portion of his men. This explains why Ken was constantly tormenting the megafauna of Iberia, along with the newly arrived peoples of Magog. When we arrived to kill Ken before embarking on this mission, I see one of my warriors losing control, and approaches Ken, threatening to kill him, pointing an arrow to his head. I am Jugatan, descendant of Joktan, and I shall be the one to end you, Ken. Right here, right now, once and for all of your crimes against our peoples. I shout at Jugatan, saying to him, Get back into position, soldier! I am the king, and I should be the one to do it. I place Ken in a chokehold. The same chokehold I saw Yue using that almost killed Ken. As I slowly take away his life, I remember the times he could have killed me, but spared me by exiling me. And now, upon knowing how my brother Toro exiled Ken, gave me hints on what to do. A few seconds before Ken's heart stops beating, I let go of his neck and I stopped choking him. Even after he killed my mother, I had a hunch it wasn't up to us to end his life anymore. Ken is already defeated. As I do this, my whole nation demand that we end with his life. Yet I don't give in, ordering my people to give me silence, sentencing Ken and his men to freedom and exile. But first, we release them by throwing them off the highest cliff while still tied up in ball position. Before I kick their bodies to the cliff, Ken says,
They are coming, the ones who sent me here, the peoples that are rising from the land of Magog, but primarily my king, the king to the Assyrians. The old man Petros who spread your people's story among Siberia couldn't give you the whole story. However, I can fill the blanks that you are missing. And there's a threat waiting for you in the far east.
And without a chance for another word, I kick Ken and his men down the cliff. We witness as their tide-heavy bodies aggressively crash and break the branches off trees. About an hour later, my spies saw them walking up and leaving. Gog tells Ken,
What is wrong with you, Ken? Why have you become so weak? A warrior like me prefers death, rather than being shamefully spared, and then utterly humiliated, and thrown into a ravine with my arms and legs and head tied behind my back by your own puny slaves and your own offspring. My army and I will make sure to give the Siberians their permanent end.
Gog, Og, and Kirk leave Ken. Kirk says,
We've noticed how embarrassingly defeated you've become. Our freedom is pitiful. This was worse than being exiled by your own son.
Ken gets crazier within his mind all alone in the wilderness, repeating,
I will hunt you down, Akko. I will be there and change your life forever. That chokehold, it was the same as the chokehold Yue did to me that one time. It was her. She trained Akko. That's how he's so powerful. Now I see.
Ken enters in turmoil. My spies affirm they later saw him possibly drowning in hatred. It was at this time that my men spot a golden eagle. This was no ordinary eagle. This was my brother's golden eagle. My brother Buriat would use this eagle to trade with us. We supplied his clan, the Hasara, with our megafauna products. Our trade route went all the way from the Hasara to Yenisei and his clan, the Sami, to Yang in Shendong's clan, to the people of Digla, further down from Kamchatka's camp. But this message says, Run. Magog and Assyria is moving toward you. The message had Nanai's mark, so I knew Nanai is mobilizing my people. But I send horsemen just to make sure the tribes are confirmed moving toward Kamchatka's camp. And I touch the ground, and again, a small earthquake can be felt. They are coming, and they are many. Sai had offered to lead the horsemen, which was weird to me, but not enough to not let him go. After all, Sai has always protected us, but I do see something in his eyes. As hundreds of thousands of people arrive at Kamchatka's camp about a week later, I am informed Sai went back to Balkai for some reason. My warriors look at me, but I have no idea. I think personally Sai met a girl of my tribe, of the ones that stayed in Balkai by Ken's land, now ruled by my brother Toro. However, I command the people to begin walking toward the east, beyond Kamchatka. We see the Assyrians and the peoples of Magog at about 5,000 leagues away from my spies that climbed the glaciers to see. They were coming fast. About a quarter of my people were elderly, and I don't know how we were going to make it. As I am about to stay and face them in battle, I tell the elderly, the women and the children to leave and escape, finishing our journey, even if it meant my men and I were to die. However, all the elders gather in a circle, and they tell me they will be the ones who will stay. I fight against this absurd idea, but my warriors convince me that the elderly will eventually know what's best. Looking back at the elderly with tears in my eyes, while they had no emotions, they were totally sure about their decision, and I will never forget them, and how they saved us by buying time for the next generation to come. I kept roaring until I felt the Assyrian horsemen finally reach the location where the elderly stayed. The plan had worked. The Assyrians stopped. We were able to escape, but just barely. My tears fell down, but we can only keep on moving. My spies see Ken crazier than ever, apparently also hunting me down. Did I do wrong by sparing Ken? Did I get too cocky? Our horses were faster than him, but I could tell our horses were at their definite limit. Before we're forced to walk upwards to a slippery hill, I see Yi and his family holding each other and looking away from a sight. It's a camp, recently used by someone. There seems to be a long arrow, filled with blood, and covered with red hair. However, Yi and his family are panicking and looking away because next to it, there's a small toy bow. This toy bow belonged to Yuan, our missing child, son of Yi. As we continue, we run into a few problems. A wide hill in front of us was slippery and very steep, but when we tried going around it, the horses didn't want to go near what our scent told us to be the shore, and we needed to think fast. We suddenly get hit by this scent of fresh meat, maybe a carcass down towards the shores. Something tells me and my group that walking up the hill seems like the best choice. The horses were choosing not to walk up the hill. I ordered the men and the women to carry about 2 children each, and those big and agile enough to walk, we let walk. We walk up, leaving the horse behind, but now my spies sense the Assyrians moving again, and Ken should be close by. We reach the top and manage to go around the mountain's edge. As we get somewhat closer to the scent of the carcass, we conclude it's obviously fresh megafauna meat. As we stealthily look throughout the mountain's edge, we see the first Assyrian warriors arriving, and they take the road through the coasts like we tried. However, as they near the coast, we see them get mauled by the biggest polar bear we have ever seen in our lives. No wonder our horses felt uneasy. Reading the horses saved our lives, at least just a bit further. We can see the Assyrians coming, and crazy old Ken. Some are pursued by bears, but most manage to cross through the openings around the coasts. All we needed is to cover a valley and reach another hill easier and seemingly safer to cross. I reached the peak, but I looked back. The Assyrians are at the other peak across this valley. They have stopped. One walks from within warriors and gets in the front of thousands of horsemen. He and I stare at each other for about 10 minutes. He raises his weapon, causing his men to shout together, but he turns and walks away. His soldiers follow him, all doing the same. That was their king, the king of the Assyrians. However, I had no idea why they were leaving like that. We continue, and 1,000 leagues from that, we begin to descend from this particular glacier. To our surprise, we reach a point between these glaciers where we could actually see vegetation. We couldn't understand how between all this ice there was such a beautiful green oasis. We also saw the megafauna. It was a long time before we seen so many. We called it Rahwakan, the green center, but I couldn't stay any longer. I knew I had to head apart with a smaller group that will help me defeat Ken. I hide the people in 2 distinct locations and order them to wait there in Rahwakan. I take with me Uri, Torouski, Kenapwe, Lenape, Yi, Khan, Yucatan, and another of my own children named Ko. I act as bait, and Ken manages to take it. He follows us for about 2 months. After the Green Center, it was brutal glaciers all over again, all along the way, where we tracked whoever took Yuan. As we finally reach quiet forests, we acknowledge we are in unknown territory. We agree it's too quiet. This is too quiet, even for any forest. I was certain we were being watched, as the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. And I was sure this wasn't Ken. The next thing I knew, a boulder flies an inch past my head. My squad and I look at the sheer size of this boulder. Then we stare at each other in utter fear and doubt.